Now that Dad's gone, this house is mine. Pack your things. My son said it quietly. Not yelling. Not angry. Just certain. I noticed the way his hand rested flat against the mahogany dining table as he spoke. The same table his father had refinished himself 15 years ago. The overhead light reflected against the polished surface, and for a strange second, I found myself staring at that reflection instead of looking at my son. The house felt too large for just the three of us that night. 7 days earlier, we had buried my husband of 38 years. The sympathy casseroles were still stacked in aluminum trays inside the refrigerator. The lilies from the funeral home were beginning to wilt, their scent turning heavy and sour in the hallway. I had cooked dinner out of habit. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans. Routine feels safer than grief. If you're here with me, stay until the end. And tell me in the comments what state you're watching from. I've learned that stories like mine travel farther than we expect. Wade cleared his throat after he said it. My daughter-in-law, Melissa, didn't look surprised. She didn't look shocked. She didn't even look uncomfortable. She reached for her wine glass. I folded my napkin carefully and placed it beside my plate. "Excuse me?" I asked. Not because I hadn't heard him, but because sometimes you need people to repeat cruelty out loud. "This place is too much for you alone, Mom," Wade continued. His tone had shifted into something rehearsed. "It's almost 2,500 square feet. The property taxes alone are nearly $9,000 a year. Maintenance, utilities, it doesn't make sense." Melissa nodded faintly. Practical, reasonable, prepared. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked loudly. It had belonged to my husband's father. It never sounded that loud before. "This house was Dad's," Wade added. "And now it's mine. You shouldn't have to worry about it anymore." Shouldn't have to worry. That was an interesting choice of words. I looked around the dining room. The crown molding we chose together. The bay window he insisted on adding during the remodel. The hardwood floors I had polished on my hands and knees when money was tight, and we couldn't afford contractors. Mine. Mine too. Melissa finally spoke. Her voice was soft, almost sympathetic. "There are some beautiful senior communities nearby," she said. "They have activities, transportation, everything included. You'd be happier." Happier. I wondered when happiness became something other people assigned to you. I took a sip of water. My hands didn't shake. I was proud of that. "Are you asking me to leave?" I said. Wade exhaled slowly, as if I were being difficult. "We're telling you it's time." Time. There it was. Not a suggestion. Not concern. A decision. I noticed something else then. My mail was stacked neatly at the end of the table. Usually it stayed by my plate. Tonight it had been moved. A small thing. But small things are rarely accidental. "I see," I said. Melissa's eyes flickered. Relief, maybe. She must have expected tears. Or an argument. Or drama. Instead, I stood. I gathered the plates. Carried them into the kitchen. Turned on the faucet. The water ran hot over my hands. No one followed me. From the dining room, I heard chairs shift. Low voices. A murmur of strategy. 38 years of marriage. 38 years of mortgage payments. 38 years of hosting Thanksgiving for 20 people in this very house. And now I was being repositioned like outdated furniture. I dried my hands slowly. When I returned to the doorway, Wade was checking something on his phone. Melissa leaned toward him, whispering. They stopped when they saw me. "I'll start packing tomorrow," I said calmly. Wade blinked. He hadn't expected that. "That's probably for the best," he replied. "Probably." I nodded once. Then I walked upstairs. Our bedroom still smelled like my husband's aftershave. His reading glasses sat on the nightstand exactly where he left them the night before his heart attack. I sat on the edge of the bed. The silence in the house felt different now. Not heavy with grief. Heavy with calculation. I opened the top drawer of the dresser and removed a small leather folder. My husband had handed it to me 3 years ago after a brief hospital stay. "Just in case," he had said. I hadn't opened it since. My fingers rested on the clasp for a long moment. Downstairs, I heard Melissa laugh softly at something Wade said. "Pack your things." I closed the folder without opening it. Not yet. Instead, I reached for my phone and set an alarm for 9 a.m. The next morning, I would go to the bank. And that was when I began to understand something my son had clearly forgotten. This house may carry his father's name, but it carries mine too. I woke up before the alarm. For a few seconds, I forgot. Then I heard the pipes. Melissa was already in the downstairs shower. She had never used that bathroom before. I lay still, staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly above me. My husband used to complain about the clicking sound it made on humid days. I used to tell him we'd replace it eventually. Eventually never came. The house felt different that morning. Not just quieter. Occupied. I sat up and reached for the leather folder in my dresser drawer. This time, I opened it. Inside were copies. Property deed. Trust documents. A letter from the attorney. My husband had always believed in paper trails. Digital disappears, he used to say. Ink stays. My name was there. Not beside his. Not beneath his. First. Primary trustee. I closed the folder gently. No rush. No panic. Downstairs, I could hear cabinet doors opening. Coffee brewing. The scrape of a chair across hardwood. I dressed carefully. Navy slacks. A cream cardigan. The pearl earrings my husband bought me on our 25th anniversary. Not for them. For me. When I walked into the kitchen, Melissa was standing at the counter scrolling through her phone. Wade sat at the table, reading something on his laptop. They both looked up. Morning, Wade said. Like nothing had happened. Good morning, I replied. I poured myself coffee. Used my mug. The one with the faded blue handle. Melissa had moved it to a different cabinet. I noticed. Small things. You sleep okay? She asked lightly. Yes. Wade cleared his throat. Mom, we can start looking at places this week. There's a retirement community about 10 miles from here. They have transportation, and I have an appointment this morning. I interrupted. He paused. For what? The bank. Silence. Not loud. Just tight. Melissa set her phone down. Why? I met her eyes. Calmly. Because I've never missed a mortgage payment in 38 years, I said. I'd like to make sure everything is in order. Wade shifted in his chair. Dad handled that stuff. And I signed every document beside him. That landed. He looked away first. I finished my coffee. Rinsed the cup. Placed it back where it belonged. I'll be back before noon, I said. No one offered to drive me. The morning air outside was cool, crisp. The maple tree in the front yard had started losing leaves early this year. My husband planted it when Wade turned 10. I drove myself. The bank was 12 minutes away. Same branch we'd used for decades. Same brick exterior. Same flag out front. Inside, the air smelled like paper and carpet cleaner. Mrs. Patterson was still there. She'd processed our home equity line 15 years ago. Well, hello, she said softly when she saw me. I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you, I replied. She guided me to her office. Closed the glass door. What can I help you with today? I placed the leather folder on her desk. I'd like to review all accounts connected to the property at 114 Cedar Ridge Drive, I said. Professional. Clear. She typed for a moment. Her expression shifted, not alarmed, but attentive. Everything is still active, she said. Joint account remains unchanged. No recent transfers. No ownership changes? None. I nodded slowly. And the trust? I asked. That would be handled through your attorney. But according to our records, you are listed as primary trustee. Primary. The word felt steady. Mrs. Patterson leaned forward slightly. Has someone suggested otherwise? I smiled politely. I just believe in confirming details. She printed several documents for me. Account summaries. Property tax history. Mortgage payoff confirmation from 3 years ago. Paid in full. I thanked her and stepped back into the sunlight. Inside my purse, the papers felt heavier than they were. On the drive home, I thought about Wade at 8 years old, sitting at that same kitchen table doing math homework. He used to ask me how mortgages worked. I'd explain it with simple numbers, drawing diagrams on scrap paper. He used to listen. By the time I pulled into the driveway, Melissa's SUV had been repositioned. Closer to the garage. Closer. I turned off the engine, but didn't step out immediately. Grief is strange. It makes you miss the man you lost and question the child you raised at the same time. When I walked inside, I heard voices again. Low. Urgent. They stopped when they saw me. You were quick, Melissa said. Yes. Wade stood up. So. I set my purse down on the entry table. The mortgage is paid, I said calmly. Has been. For 3 years. He blinked. And there have been no ownership changes. Melissa crossed her arms. We weren't saying there were. No, I agreed gently. You were saying it was time. Silence again. I removed the printed papers and placed them neatly on the dining table. The same table from last night. My name is still on every document. I continued. Exactly where it has always been. Wade's jaw tightened. Mom, This isn't about paperwork. It's about what makes sense. I looked at him for a long moment. What makes sense? I repeated softly. Then I gathered the documents back into my purse. I have one more appointment this week, I said. With your father's attorney. That changed the temperature in the room. Melissa spoke first. Why would you need to do that? I met her eyes again. Because your father believed in preparation, I said. And I believe in understanding. No anger. No raised voice. Just clarity. I walked past them and up the stairs. Behind me, I heard nothing. And for the first time since the funeral, I realized something important. They thought I was grieving. They forgot I was also thinking. That afternoon, I didn't go back downstairs right away. I stayed in the bedroom. Not crying. Not resting. Listening. When you've lived in the same house for nearly 4 decades, you learn its language. The way the stairs creak under different weights. The difference between a cabinet door closing gently and one being shut with intention. Around 3 o'clock, I heard the front door open. Male voice. Unfamiliar. Heavy boots on hardwood. I stood slowly and walked to the top of the stairs. I didn't go down. I didn't announce myself. I just listened. Just the front and garage entry? The man asked. Yes, Melissa replied. And we'll need new keypads. Keypads. Wade said something lower, harder to catch. Then the metallic sound of tools. I stepped back into the bedroom before anyone could look up. New locks. That was faster than I expected. I sat at the edge of the bed and folded my hands in my lap. My husband used to joke that I had the patience of a schoolteacher. 32 years in public education will do that to you. You learn not to react to noise. You wait for patterns. An hour later, Wade knocked lightly on the bedroom door. Mom. Yes. He opened it halfway. Didn't step inside. We updated the security system, he said. Just safer that way. Of course, I replied. He hesitated. We'll get you a new code. Will. Future tense. I nodded once. Thank you. He looked relieved that I hadn't argued. That I hadn't demanded the old code. That I hadn't asked who authorized the change. He still thought this was about comfort. After he left, I opened the nightstand drawer and removed my husband's old address book. Paper. Worn edges. Numbers written in ink. I found the attorney's name. Daniel Harper. We'd used him when my husband had that heart scare 5 years ago. The first time the word trust entered our conversations. I dialed the number. It rang twice. Harper and Mills, a receptionist, answered. I'd like to confirm my appointment for Thursday, I said. Under the name Eleanor Whitman. A brief pause. Keyboard clicking. Yes, Mrs. Whitman. Mr. Harper has you scheduled for 10:30 a.m. Thank you. I hung up. Downstairs, laughter again. Low. Private. They weren't celebrating. Not exactly. They were strategizing. I waited until evening before going back down. The new keypad by the garage door glowed faintly blue. I noticed Wade watching me as I walked past it. He was measuring something. Dinner was simpler that night. Leftovers. No effort to pretend normal. Melissa set 3 plates on the table. Not 4. I sat in my usual chair. Halfway through the meal, Wade cleared his throat again. He'd always done that before asking for money as a teenager. So, he began. Have you thought about where you might want to go? Might. As if this were my idea. I have, I said calmly. Melissa leaned forward slightly. There's a lovely place in Brookhaven. Gated. Very clean. I'm sure there is. Wade frowned. Mom, we're trying to make this easier. For whom? I asked. The question lingered between us. He shifted. For everyone. I dabbed my mouth with my napkin. I met with the bank today, I said evenly. Melissa's fork paused midair. And I'll be meeting with your father's attorney on Thursday. This time, neither of them masked their reaction. Wade's shoulders stiffened. Why? Because I've been advised to review all estate documents personally. Advised by who? Melissa asked quickly. By experience, I replied. Silence. You could hear the refrigerator hum. Wade leaned back in his chair. Mom, you don't need to get lawyers involved. They're already involved, I said softly. Your father involved them. Melissa exchanged a glance with him. There it was. Not fear, but uncertainty. They weren't as sure as they had been last night. After dinner, I carried my plate to the sink again. I washed it myself. When I turned around, Wade was standing behind me. You don't trust us? He asked. I studied his face. He still had the same crease between his eyebrows he'd had as a boy when he lied about breaking a lamp. I trust paperwork, I said gently. That hurt him more than anger would have. Later that night, I walked to the garage door and pressed random numbers on the new keypad. Error. Again. Error. I smiled faintly. They had changed the locks. But they had not changed the deed. Upstairs, I sat at the small writing desk by the window and opened the leather folder again. This time, I read every page. Clause by clause. Line by line. And halfway through, I found something I hadn't remembered. A conditional provision. A sentence my husband must have insisted on. If any beneficiary attempts to remove the primary trustee from the property through coercion or undue pressure, their inheritance rights may be suspended pending legal review. I read it twice. Then a third time. Downstairs, the television turned on. A normal evening. Ordinary sounds. But the ground beneath this house had shifted. They thought they were securing doors. They didn't realize they were stepping onto thin ice. And Thursday was coming. Thursday came quietly. No raised voices. No slammed doors. Just breakfast at 7:30 a.m. and the sound of Melissa's spoon tapping against her cereal bowl. Wade didn't ask where I was going. He already knew. I wore the same navy slacks from Monday. The cream cardigan again. I tied my hair back neatly, the way I used to before parent-teacher conferences. You don't walk into serious rooms looking uncertain. I'll be out for a couple of hours, I said. Melissa gave a tight smile. We'll be here. I didn't respond to that. Of course they would be. The law office sat in a 2-story brick building near downtown. Brass lettering on the door, Harper and Mills, estate planning and probate. The waiting room smelled faintly of leather and coffee. Diplomas framed on the walls. Order, structure, rules. Mr. Harper stood when he saw me. Mrs. Whitman, he said warmly. I was sorry to hear about your husband. Thank you, I replied. We sat across from each other at a long wooden conference table, the kind built for decisions. He folded his hands. How can I help you today? I placed the leather folder between us. I need clarity, I said. He nodded once. Not surprised. He opened his own copy of the trust documents from a file drawer beside him. Your husband was very specific, he began. He wanted to ensure you would never be displaced from your primary residence. Displaced. That word landed differently than pack your things. He also made you sole primary trustee, Mr. Harper continued. That means you control the property during your lifetime. And after? I asked. After your passing, the property transfers to your son, provided certain conditions are met. Conditions. He slid a page toward me. Highlighted. There is a protective clause, he said carefully. If any beneficiary attempts to coerce or pressure the primary trustee to vacate the property against her will, their inheritance rights may be suspended or revoked. Revoked. Not delayed. Not reduced. Revoked. My husband had always been a quiet man, but when he made decisions, he carved them into stone. Was this his idea? I asked softly. Mr. Harper allowed himself a small smile. Very much so. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. What would qualify as coercion? I asked. That depends, he replied. Changing locks. Restricting access. Pressuring relocation. We would evaluate behavior in context. Changing locks. I folded my hands in my lap. And if I chose to enforce it, we would send formal notice. After review, the trust could be amended to remove the beneficiary. Simple language. Serious consequences. I thought of Wade at 12, refusing to apologize for something he knew he'd done, waiting to see if I'd follow through. I always did. Thank you, I said. Mr. Harper leaned back slightly. Your husband trusted you to make wise decisions, Mrs. Whitman. He believed you were stronger than you think. I nodded once. Strength doesn't always look like volume. When I returned home, the garage keypad blinked at me again. I didn't attempt the code. Inside, I found Melissa at the kitchen island, reviewing something on her tablet. Wade stood when he saw me enter. How did it go? He asked. Straight to it. It was informative, I said, setting my purse down carefully. In what way? Melissa asked. I removed a single sheet of paper from the folder. Not the whole stack. Just one page. I laid it flat on the dining table. The trust includes a clause, I said calmly, regarding coercion. Wade's face shifted almost imperceptibly. Coercion, he repeated. Yes. Melissa crossed her arms. No one is coercing you. I'm glad to hear that, I replied evenly. Silence. The grandfather clock ticked. Wade stepped closer to the table, but didn't touch the paper. What exactly are you saying, Mom? I'm saying, I answered gently, that this house cannot be transferred while I'm alive unless I choose to leave. And if I'm pressured to do so, there are consequences written in black and white. Melissa's jaw tightened. That sounds extreme. It sounds prepared, I said. Wade looked from me to the paper and back again. You'd actually use that? He asked quietly. I studied him for a long moment. You told me it was time, I said. I'm simply making sure the timing is legally correct. No anger. No trembling. Just clarity. Melissa reached for Wade's arm subtly. A silent message. Shift strategy. Wade exhaled slowly. Mom, nobody's trying to push you out. Good, I replied. I gathered the paper and returned it to my folder. Because if that were the case, I continued softly. Your father anticipated it. That ended the conversation. Not because they agreed, but because they understood. That evening, no one mentioned retirement communities. No one mentioned packing. The new locks still gleamed on the doors. But the house felt different now. Balanced. I went upstairs before them. As I passed the hallway mirror, I caught my reflection. Same woman. Same house. But something had shifted behind my eyes. Grief was still there, but it was no longer alone. Now it stood beside resolve. And downstairs, for the first time since the funeral, the whispers had stopped. The house adjusted before they did. That's the only way I can explain it. By Friday evening, no one mentioned moving boxes. No brochures appeared on the counter. No cheerful suggestions about simplifying. Instead, there was space. Careful space. Melissa cooked dinner that night. Lemon chicken. Rice. A salad arranged too neatly, like something from a magazine spread. She set 4 chairs at the table. 4. It had been 3 all week. I noticed immediately. Wade pulled out my chair before I reached it. A small gesture. Delayed by days. Smells good, I said. Melissa smiled tightly. Thought we could all sit down together. All. Interesting word. We bowed our heads briefly before eating. Wade offered a short prayer. Something about guidance and family unity. He hadn't prayed out loud in years. People return to faith when paperwork doesn't favor them. Halfway through dinner, Wade cleared his throat again. That sound had become familiar this week. Mom, he began carefully. We might have moved too fast. Might have. I placed my fork down gently. In what way? I asked. Melissa leaned forward. We were just thinking about what's practical long-term. For whom? I said again. Neither of them answered immediately. Wade shifted. You know this house is a lot to manage. Yes, I said. It has been for decades. He hesitated. Dad always handled the repairs. Your father handled the roof, I corrected softly. I handled everything else. Groceries, insurance, property tax payments, utility bills, holiday hosting, lawn service contracts, mortgage negotiations when interest rates shifted. Invisible labor doesn't disappear because someone passes away. Melissa changed direction. We just don't want you stressed. I'm not stressed, I replied calmly. That unsettled her more than anger would have. Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't sharp. It was cautious. After dinner, Wade helped clear the plates without being asked. He hadn't done that earlier in the week. Behavior adjusts when consequences become real. Later that night, I heard them talking in the living room. Not whispering. Not laughing. Talking. Measured. I didn't try to catch every word. I didn't need to. The tone had shifted from certainty to calculation. Saturday morning, I woke to the sound of the garage door opening. I looked out the bedroom window. Wade was moving his SUV out of the driveway. Melissa stood near the porch, arms folded. They were arguing. Quietly, but not softly. I couldn't hear the words, only the rhythm. Tension. Frustration. She gestured toward the house. He shook his head. Interesting. When he came back inside, he knocked on my bedroom door. Mom. Yes. He stepped in fully this time. Can we talk? I closed the book in my lap. Of course. He sat in the chair near the window, the one his father used. To sit in on Sunday mornings with coffee and the newspaper. That detail did not escape me. I didn't know about the clause, Wade said quietly. I know. He looked down at his hands. Dad never told me. He didn't need to. That stung. I could see it. Wade exhaled slowly. Are you planning to use it? There it was. Not did we do something wrong. But will there be consequences? I'm planning to live here, I said. That's all. He nodded faintly. Melissa appeared in the doorway but didn't enter. We just want clarity, she said. I've provided it, I replied. She hesitated. Changing the locks wasn't about pushing you out. No, I asked gently. It was about security. For whom? I repeated. That question had weight now. No one answered. That afternoon, a small envelope appeared on the kitchen counter. Addressed to me. Inside was a folded piece of paper with a 4-digit code written in Wade's handwriting. The new keypad combination. No note. No explanation. Just the code. I stared at it for a moment. Then I walked to the garage door and entered the numbers. The lock beeped softly. Access restored. Symbolic gestures matter. That evening, I cooked. Pot roast again. Not because I needed routine, but because it reminded the house who I was. Melissa hovered nearby, offering to help. I let her chop carrots. Wade set the table without instruction. For chairs again. During dinner, no one mentioned retirement communities. No one mentioned timelines. Instead, Wade asked, "Do you need anything fixed around the house?" I looked at him carefully. "Yes," I said after a pause. "The fence panel in the backyard has been loose for months." He nodded immediately. "I'll take care of it tomorrow." Melissa watched him, studying, recalculating. After they went to bed, I stayed downstairs a while longer. The grandfather clock ticked steadily. The house felt steadier too. Not peaceful. Not yet. But no longer tilted. I walked to the front door and touched the new lock lightly. They had tried to control entry. What they forgot is that ownership isn't just about keys. It's about authority. Upstairs, I placed the envelope with the keypad code inside the leather folder. Not as a threat. As a record. Because my husband believed in documentation. And I've learned something this week. Grief makes people impatient. But paperwork makes them careful. And careful. People don't rush a woman who finally understands her leverage. Sunday mornings used to belong to my husband. Coffee in his blue ceramic mug. The newspaper folded precisely. The back door cracked open just enough to let in fresh air. This Sunday, the mug sat untouched in the cabinet. Wade was in the backyard by 8 a.m., tools scattered near the loose fence panel I had mentioned the night before. He worked quietly. No headphones. No phone calls. Just the steady rhythm of hammer against wood. I stood at the kitchen sink and watched through the window without making it obvious. Melissa moved around the living room, adjusting throw pillows that didn't need adjusting. The house felt like it was holding its breath. Not because of conflict. Because of recalibration. When Wade came back inside, there was a thin line of sweat across his forehead. "Fence is fixed," he said. "Thank you," I replied. He nodded once. Not looking for praise. Melissa stepped in quickly. "We were thinking maybe we could all sit down later and talk about long-term plans." Long-term. Different phrasing now. "Of course," I said. "After lunch." No tension in my voice. That unsettled her again. We gathered in the living room at 2 o'clock. For seats this time. I chose the armchair near the window. Wade sat on the sofa. Melissa beside him, but not leaning into him like before. Distance speaks. Wade began. "Mom, we don't want things to feel divided." Divided. An interesting choice. "I don't feel divided," I said calmly. Melissa folded her hands together. "We just want clarity about expectations." Expectations. That word mattered. "What expectations are you concerned about?" I asked. Wade inhaled slowly. "Are you planning to stay here permanently?" "Yes." Direct. Unapologetic. He nodded faintly. "And after?" Melissa asked. There it was. Future positioning. "After my lifetime, the trust outlines that clearly," I said. Wade looked uncomfortable. "We understand that. Do you?" I asked gently. Silence. I wasn't challenging them. I was reminding them. Melissa shifted tactics. "We just need to know what role we have here." Role. Not ownership. Progress. "This is my home," I said evenly. "You're welcome here as long as we respect that." Wade looked up. "And if we don't?" I met his eyes. "Then paperwork handles what emotion cannot." The room went very still. Not hostile. Just clear. That evening, Melissa cooked again. Not extravagantly. Not performative. Just normal. Normal had returned in small pieces. After dinner, Wade brought out an old photo album from the hallway cabinet. The one with plastic sleeves that always stuck together. "Found this while cleaning the garage," he said. Cleaning. Another new behavior. He handed it to me. Inside were pictures of the three of us in this very house. Christmas mornings. Birthday cakes. Backyard barbecues. There was one photo of Wade at 16, standing in front of the maple tree his father planted. Proud. Certain. "I didn't think about how much you built here too," he said quietly. Not an apology. But close. I traced the edge of the photo with my finger. "Your father and I built this life together," I said softly. "That includes you." Melissa watched closely. I closed the album. "But building something," I continued, "is different from inheriting it." No accusation. Just truth. Monday morning, I received a call from Mr. Harper's office. Routine follow-up. Just confirming, the assistant said, that you'd like documentation prepared in case formal notice becomes necessary. Prepared. There was that word again. Yes, I said calmly. Prepare it, but don't send it. A pause. Understood. Preparation is power. Delivery is choice. When I hung up, I felt steadier than I had in weeks. Downstairs, Wade was reviewing bills at the dining table. He looked up when I entered. I can cover the utilities, he said quickly. At least while we're all here. While we're all here. Temporary language now. That won't be necessary, I replied. But thank you. He nodded slowly. He was learning something. That this wasn't about money. Or square footage. Or practicality. It was about position. Melissa entered with her laptop and sat across from him. Maybe we should look at refinancing options, she suggested. Refinancing. A house paid in full. I almost smiled. There's nothing to refinance, I said gently. The mortgage was paid 3 years ago. Wade glanced at her. She hadn't known. Information shifts dynamics. That night, as I walked upstairs, I paused at the hallway mirror again. The same woman stared back at me. Widow. Mother. Trustee. Not displaced. Not uncertain. Downstairs, I could hear Wade explaining something in a lower voice. Melissa responding more quietly than usual. No more whispers. No more laughter behind closed doors. Just conversation. Measured. And for the first time since that sentence at the dinner table, I realized something clearly. They weren't trying to push me out anymore. They were trying to figure out how to stand beside me. And that is a very different negotiation. By the second week, the house felt less like a battlefield and more like a courtroom after the verdict. Quiet. Measured. Careful. Wade left earlier in the mornings now. He'd always worked long hours, but this was different. There was a tension in the way he grabbed his keys. A restraint in the way he closed the door. Melissa stayed home more than usual. She used to move through the kitchen like it was temporary space. Now she moved slower, observing where things belonged, putting them back exactly where she found them. Respect can be learned, sometimes the hard way. On Tuesday afternoon, I was sorting through old insurance files at the dining table when Melissa approached with 2 cups of tea. Not coffee. Tea. Chamomile. She set one beside me without speaking. Thank you, I said. She lingered for a moment before sitting down across from me. I didn't know about the clause, she said quietly. There it was again. Not I'm sorry. But I didn't know. I believe you, I replied. She studied my face, searching for something. Anger. Bitterness. Satisfaction. I offered none. We weren't trying to hurt you, she added. I know, I said calmly. You were trying to secure something. She didn't deny it. That was new. For the future, she said after a pause. Whose future? I asked gently. She looked down at her hands. Our families. I let the silence sit between us. I am your family, I said softly. That landed differently than anything I'd said before. Melissa nodded faintly. I think we forgot that, she admitted. Honesty changes rooms. Not dramatically, but permanently. That evening, Wade asked if we could review the trust together. Together. The word held weight. We sat at the dining table again, the same place where he had told me to pack my things. The papers were spread neatly in front of us. He read slowly this time, not scanning for opportunity, reading for understanding. When he reached the conditional clause, he stopped. I didn't think Dad would ever. He didn't finish the sentence. Plan for you to challenge me? I offered gently. He swallowed. Yeah. Your father loved you, I said. But he trusted me. There's a difference. Wade leaned back in his chair. Did you ask him to add that clause? No, he nodded slowly. That sounds like him, he murmured. It did. My husband had never raised his voice in 38 years of marriage. But he built safety nets quietly. Melissa spoke up. If you had enforced it, would you have removed Wade completely? Direct question. I would have done what was necessary to protect my position, I said. Not revenge. Not punishment. Protection. Wade absorbed that. Later that night, I heard something unfamiliar. An apology. Soft. Almost whispered. From Wade to Melissa. I pushed too hard, he said. I wasn't meant to hear it. But houses carry sound. I thought we were being practical, he added. Melissa responded quietly. We were being impatient. Impatience. That word felt accurate. Grief makes time feel unstable. People try to secure ground before it shifts again. But sometimes they step on someone else to do it. Wednesday morning, I walked to the garage keypad again. I entered the code without hesitation. It opened smoothly. Symbolism matters. Wade was at the kitchen counter when I came back inside. I called the insurance company, he said. Updated the policy to make sure you're listed as primary contact. Not himself. Me. Thank you, I replied. He nodded. There was no tension in his shoulders now. Just awareness. Melissa joined us with a folder in her hands. We drafted something, she said carefully. Not legal. Just an understanding. She handed it to me. A written agreement stating that no decisions about the house would be discussed without my direct involvement. No signatures yet. Just intention. I read it slowly, line by line. When I finished, I looked up. This is thoughtful, I said. Melissa exhaled softly, as if she'd been holding her breath. I don't need a document to feel secure, I added. But I appreciate the gesture. And I meant it. Because gestures after correction matter more than gestures before confrontation. That evening, I sat alone in the living room for a while. The grandfather clock ticked steadily. The maple tree outside swayed gently in the wind. The house didn't feel threatened anymore. It felt claimed. Not by force. By clarity. Wade joined me after a few minutes. He didn't sit in his father's chair. He chose the sofa instead. Mom, he said quietly, I was scared. That was the first true confession. Of what? I asked. Losing control. I studied him. You never had control of this house, I said gently. You had access. He nodded. I see that now. Silence settled between us again. Not sharp. Not defensive. Just honest. Grief was still in the room. But it wasn't driving decisions anymore. Understanding was. And for the first time since that sentence at the dinner table, I realized something clearly. My son wasn't my adversary. He was a man who mistook inheritance for authority. And now he was learning the difference by the third week. The house no longer felt unstable. It felt watched. Not by outsiders. By memory. Grief settles into corners once conflict leaves the room. That Wednesday morning, I decided to clean out the small wall safe in our bedroom closet. The one behind the winter coats. My husband had installed it himself 15 years ago after a neighbor's break-in. He never trusted flimsy locks. I entered the code. It opened on the first try. Inside were the usual things. Passports, a few old savings bonds, copies of tax returns, the original deed, and an envelope I didn't recognize. My name written on the front in my husband's handwriting. Not legal script. Not official. Just ink. Eleanor. I sat down on the edge of the bed before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No date. Just a short note. If you're reading this, it means I'm not there to explain things the way I usually do. I stopped there for a moment. His voice felt close. I know Wade. He loves deeply, but he moves quickly when he's afraid. And Melissa is practical. Sometimes too practical. If they ever forget your place in this house, I've made sure the law remembers it. My fingers tightened slightly on the paper. This home was built by both of us. Every mortgage payment. Every repair. Every holiday meal. I don't want you ever feeling like a guest in it. Guest. That word again. Use what I've put in place if you need to. But if you can resolve it without destroying the relationship, do that first. There was no signature. He didn't need one. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. For a long moment, I just sat there. Not crying. Not collapsing. Just steady. He had anticipated not only legal conflict, but emotional tension. He had trusted me to navigate both. That evening, I asked Wade and Melissa to sit down with me. Not because something was wrong, but because something needed to be said. We gathered at the dining table again. It had become our courtroom, our negotiation space, our confession booth. I found a letter from your father, I began. Wade looked up immediately. A letter, he asked. Yes. I didn't hand it to him yet. He knew this might be difficult. I continued calmly. He knew grief can make people reach for stability in ways that aren't always fair. Melissa lowered her eyes. Wade stayed still. He wrote that he trusted me to protect both this house and our family. I let that settle. He also said that if I could resolve things without destroying relationships, I should try. Silence. Not defensive this time. Reflective. Wade spoke first. Did we almost cross that line? I studied him. You stepped close, I said gently. But you stepped back. That mattered. Melissa looked up at me then. We were thinking about security, she said quietly. About making sure everything didn't spiral. Security is important, I agreed. But security built on displacement creates resentment. She nodded slowly. I don't want resentment, she said. Neither did I. I finally slid the envelope across the table. Wade opened it carefully. He read in silence. Halfway through, his jaw tightened. By the end, his eyes were different. Not ashamed, but aware. He thought I'd push? Wade asked quietly. He thought you might panic, I replied. That was more accurate. Melissa reached for the letter and read it too. When she finished, she exhaled slowly. We underestimated you, she said. That was the first full admission. Not misunderstood. Not miscommunicated. Underestimated. I've been managing this household longer than you've been married, I said calmly. Underestimating me is expensive. There was no edge in my tone. Just truth. Wade folded the letter carefully and handed it back to me. I don't want to fight you, he said. I don't want to fight either, I replied. Then what do you want? Melissa asked. Clarity again. I want acknowledgement, I said. That this house is mine to steward while I'm alive. That I am not a temporary obstacle between you and inheritance. Wade nodded slowly. You're not, he said. Melissa followed. You're not. Words matter. Even late ones. That night, I placed the letter in the leather folder with the trust documents. Legal protection on one side. Personal intention on the other. Balance. Before going to bed, I walked through the house slowly. Living room. Kitchen. Hallway. Each space carried history. And now, correction. The new locks were still on the doors. But they no longer felt like barriers. They felt like reminders. Not of threat. Of boundaries. Upstairs, as I turned off the bedroom light, I realized something quietly powerful. The conflict had never really been about ownership. It had been about fear. Fear of instability. Fear of loss. Fear of being left with nothing solid to stand on. My son reached for the house because he had just lost his father. But what he almost forgot was that I had lost him too. And I was still standing. That changes the equation. Completely. 3 Sundays after the funeral, I set the table for 5. Not 4. 5. Wade noticed immediately. Are we expecting someone? He asked. Yes, I said calmly. Your Aunt Carol. He blinked. Dad's sister. Yes. Melissa adjusted the silverware slightly. That's nice. Nice. Interesting word. I hadn't invited Carol to take sides. I invited her because this house had history before Wade ever thought about inheritance. Because witnesses matter. Because family memory stretches beyond one generation. Carol arrived at 1 o'clock sharp, carrying a pecan pie in a glass dish she'd owned longer than I've known her. She hugged me first. Not dramatically, just firmly. Then she stepped inside and looked around slowly. Smells like him in here, she said softly. Yes, I replied. We all sat down. 5 chairs. 5 plates. Carol at the head of the table, the seat my husband once occupied. Not as replacement. As respect. Dinner started politely. Weather. Work. Small talk. Then Carol did what Carol has always done. She asked direct questions. So, she said, cutting into her roast chicken, how's everyone holding up since the will was reviewed? The air shifted. Melissa glanced at Wade. Wade cleared his throat. It's been educational, he said. Carol looked at me. Eleanor. I'm comfortable, I replied. That word again. Comfortable. Carol nodded slowly. Your brother was meticulous, she said to Wade. He didn't leave loose ends. Wade nodded. I see that now. Carol sipped her iced tea. Good. Silence. Then she added, he built that trust to protect her. Not confrontational. Just factual. Wade didn't argue. Melissa didn't either. There's something about hearing truth from someone outside the conflict. It lands differently. After dinner, we moved into the living room. Coffee cups balanced on coasters that had been in this house for 20 years. Carol studied the maple tree through the front window. Remember when he planted that? She asked me. Yes. Wade cried because he thought it would take forever to grow. Wade smiled faintly. It did. No. Carol corrected gently. It grew exactly as it was meant to. The room fell quiet. Metaphors don't need explanation when everyone understands them. When Carol left, she hugged Wade tightly. Take care of your mother, she said quietly. Not listen to her. Not obey. Take care. Responsibility, not ownership. After she drove away, Wade stood in the driveway a moment longer than necessary. When he came back inside, he didn't go straight to the kitchen or the couch. He sat at the dining table again. Dad talked to Aunt Carol before he finalized everything, he said. Yes, I replied. You knew? I did. He nodded slowly. So he really thought I might. He trailed off. He thought you were human, I said gently. Melissa leaned against the kitchen counter. I don't want this to be about clauses and warnings anymore, she said. It doesn't have to be, I answered. Wade looked up at me. What does it need to be about, he asked. Trust, I said. Not the legal document. The other kind. He let out a slow breath. That's fair. Fair. That word hadn't been used much in the first week. That evening, something small but significant happened. Wade brought out a toolbox and removed the new locks from the front door. Not all of them. Just the heavy, unnecessary secondary bolt they'd added. He replaced it with a standard handle set, the same type we'd always used. He handed me one of the keys. Not because I needed it, but because he wanted to. I overcorrected, he said quietly. I took the key. I know. Melissa watched from the doorway. Not defensive, not calculating, just observing. Correction doesn't erase what happened, but it redraws the line. Later that night, I sat alone at the dining table again. The same table where I had been told to pack my things. The same table where I had placed trust documents. The same table where my husband once carved a turkey every Thanksgiving. It felt steady now, grounded. I opened the leather folder and reviewed everything once more. Trust documents. Attorney notes. The handwritten letter. Preparation doesn't disappear just because tension fades. It remains. As insurance. As wisdom. Upstairs, I could hear Wade and Melissa talking quietly. Not about selling. Not about relocating. Just about work schedules and grocery lists. Ordinary conversation. Normal life returning. But this time, with boundaries understood. Before turning off the lights, I walked to the front door and tested the new handle. Solid. Balanced. Not excessive. Not defensive. Just secure. And I realized something quietly important. The house hadn't changed. The square footage was the same. The deed hadn't moved. What changed was the understanding of who stands at the center of it. Not as an obstacle. Not as a placeholder. But as the foundation. And foundations don't pack their things. They hold everything up. By the fourth week, the house had settled into a new rhythm. Not the old one. Not entirely. But something steadier. Wade no longer rushed through rooms like he was measuring them. Melissa stopped mentioning future planning in coded language. The dining table returned to being just a dining table. But there was still something unfinished. Not conflict. Clarity. It came on a Tuesday evening. I was reviewing the monthly property tax statement at the kitchen counter when Wade walked in from work, loosened his tie, and stood there for a moment like he was rehearsing something in his head. Mom, he said finally, can we talk? I folded the paper neatly and placed it aside. Of course. We sat across from each other at the table again. That table had heard more truth in 1 month than in the previous 10 years. Melissa stayed in the living room at first, giving space. That, too, was new. Wade rested his forearms on the table. I've been thinking, he began. That sentence no longer made me nervous. About what? I asked calmly. About why I reacted the way I did. He didn't look defensive. He looked tired. When Dad died, he continued, everything felt unstable. The house felt like the only solid thing left. I thought if I could secure it, I'd feel better. There it was. Not greed. Fear. I understand that. I said quietly. He nodded. But I went about it wrong. I didn't interrupt. I treated you like part of the transition plan, he admitted. Not like the foundation. That word again. Foundation. I let the silence sit for a moment before speaking. You were grieving, I said. Grief makes people reach for control. He swallowed. I didn't think you'd push back. Honest. I didn't want to, I replied. That surprised him. You didn't. No, I said. I wanted to believe my place here was obvious. He leaned back slightly, absorbing that. It should have been, he said. Melissa joined us then, sitting beside him but not speaking immediately. We miscalculated, she said softly. I looked at her. In what way? We assumed inheritance begins the moment someone passes, she replied. We didn't think about stewardship. Stewardship. That word mattered more than ownership ever did. This house is not a trophy, I said calmly. It's responsibility. Wade nodded slowly. And you've been carrying it longer than we have, he added. Yes, but I didn't need to say it. A few days later, something small happened that told me the shift was permanent. I received a letter from the county assessor's office about an upcoming property valuation review. Normally, Wade would have taken it automatically. This time, he brought it to me unopened. This is yours, he said. Not because he couldn't handle it. Because he understood the boundary. I opened it, reviewed the details, and placed it in the file folder labeled property, primary. Not secondary. Not shared. Primary. Melissa watched quietly. There was no resentment in her expression now. Just recalibration. That Sunday, I made pot roast again. Not out of habit. Out of choice. When we sat down to eat, Wade paused before starting. I want to say something, he said. Melissa glanced at him, but didn't interrupt. He looked at me directly. I'm sorry for telling you to pack your things. There it was. Not indirect. Not softened. Direct. I was wrong. The room didn't erupt into emotion. There were no dramatic reactions. I nodded once. Thank you, I said. And I meant it. Because apologies are not about volume. They're about ownership. Melissa added quietly, we were wrong. Plural. Accountability shared. I took a sip of water before responding. I accept that, I said. But understand something. They both waited. I will always protect my position here, I continued calmly. Not because I don't trust you, but because your father trusted me. Wade nodded. You should. Melissa agreed. The air in the room felt different. Not heavy. Not tense. Resolved. That night, after they went upstairs, I remained at the table alone for a few minutes. The house was quiet. Balanced. The maple tree outside cast shadows across the front lawn under the porch light. I thought about that first night. Pack your things. The certainty in his voice. The assumption. And I realized something quietly powerful. The most important conversation wasn't the one where I threatened legal consequences. It was the one where I didn't. Because power doesn't need to shout when it's documented. And respect doesn't grow from fear. It grows from correction. Upstairs, I heard Wade laugh softly at something Melissa said. Normal life. Not strategic life. Just ordinary. I turned off the dining room light and walked toward the staircase. As I passed the front door, I ran my hand lightly over the handle. Solid. Balanced. Still mine. And this time, no one questioned it. A month after the funeral, the house felt steady again. Not untouched, but steady. Grief had softened at the edges. The sharpness was gone. What remained was quiet memory, the kind that sits beside you instead of pressing against your chest. Wade and Melissa had settled into a new pattern. Respectful. Measured. No more strategic conversations in low tones. No more glances exchanged over my shoulder. But I had learned something important. Peace that returns too easily can disappear the same way. So I made a decision. I just didn't announce it. On a Wednesday morning, I drove back to Harper and Mills. Not because there was a crisis. Because there wasn't. Mr. Harper greeted me the same way he had before. Everything all right? He asked. Yes, I replied. Everything is calm. He nodded. That's good to hear. I'd like to update the trust, I said. He leaned back slightly. Not surprised. Just attentive. In what way? I'd like to clarify occupancy terms, I explained calmly. While I'm alive, no beneficiary may reside in the property without a written agreement outlining responsibilities and boundaries. He listened carefully. And after your lifetime? After my lifetime, it transfers as written, I said, provided the conditions are respected. He nodded slowly. You're not removing anyone. No, I paused. But I am defining structure. Structure protects relationships. Ambiguity strains them. He drafted the amendment while I sat quietly across from him. Clear language. Direct terms. No hostility. Just reinforcement. When I signed my name, I felt something settle inside me. Not anger. Not suspicion. Preparedness. That evening, Wade was in the backyard trimming the hedge near the fence he had repaired weeks ago. Melissa was inside, reorganizing the pantry. Ordinary life. I watched them for a moment from the kitchen window. Then I called them both to the table. No tension in my voice. No warning tone. They sat down immediately. What's wrong? Wade asked. Nothing, I said. I just wanted to inform you of something. Inform. Not ask. Not negotiate. I updated the trust this morning. I continued calmly. Melissa's posture stiffened slightly. Wade's expression shifted, not defensive, just alert. In what way? He asked carefully. I clarified occupancy terms, I replied. As long as I'm alive, anyone living here does so by written agreement. Responsibilities will be outlined. Financial contributions optional, but boundaries required. Silence. Not explosive. Measured. Melissa spoke first. Are we being asked to leave? No, I said evenly. You're being asked to understand structure. Wade leaned back slightly. You don't trust us? I trust clarity, I replied. That answer no longer wounded him. He understood it now. You think we might try again? He asked. I think people change under pressure, I said calmly. And I prefer preparation over reaction. Melissa exhaled slowly. That's fair, she admitted. Wade nodded. What kind of agreement? Respect for decision-making authority regarding the property, I said. Advanced discussion before any structural changes. Shared understanding of roles. Roles. Not ownership. Not hierarchy. Roles. Wade looked down at the table for a moment. You're protecting yourself, he said quietly. Yes. He nodded once. You should. There was no resentment in his voice. Just acceptance. The following week, we sat together and drafted a simple household agreement. Nothing aggressive. Just clarity. I remain primary decision-maker regarding the property. Major renovations require my written consent. Financial matters related to the house remain under my control. Shared spaces respected. Guests discussed in advance. It wasn't about control. It was about definition. When Wade signed it, he did so without hesitation. Melissa signed next. I signed last. 3 signatures. 3 adults. Balanced. That night, I walked through the house again. Living room. Kitchen. Hallway. Bedroom. Everything looked the same. But I knew something had shifted quietly beneath the surface. The first time I protected myself, it was reactive. This time, it was intentional. Not because I feared them, but because I had learned. Grief changes people. So does power. And when both exist in the same house, structure becomes essential. Later that evening, Wade knocked gently on my bedroom door. Mom. Yes. I'm glad you did that, he said. Did what? Made it official. I studied him for a moment. Why? I asked. Because now I don't have to guess where I stand, he replied. That surprised me. Structure doesn't just protect the person who writes it. It stabilizes everyone involved. Melissa appeared behind him. We want to build something here too, she said quietly. Not take it. Build. That word mattered. This house was built slowly, I said. Brick by brick. Payment by payment. Respect works the same way. They both nodded. No tension. No strategy. Just understanding. After they left, I turned off the bedside lamp and lay in the quiet darkness. The house felt grounded. Not because conflict had vanished, but because authority had been clarified. I didn't remove my son from the trust. I didn't enforce the clause. I didn't send formal notice. I chose something quieter. Definition. Because sometimes the strongest move is an eviction. It's structure. And in this house, structure now had my signature on it. It has been 3 months now. The lilies from the funeral are long gone. The sympathy cards have been packed into a small wooden box in my closet. The casseroles stopped coming weeks ago. Life didn't return to normal. It reshaped itself. The maple tree in the front yard is turning gold. Wade rakes the leaves on Saturday mornings without being asked. Melissa has started hosting Sunday dinners, but she asks me what I'd like on the menu first. Small things. But small things build foundations. The house is still 2,500 square feet. The hardwood floors still creak near the staircase. The grandfather clock still ticks louder than it needs to. But it no longer feels contested. It feels understood. Last week, Wade stood beside me in the kitchen while I reviewed the quarterly property tax statement. Do you want me to transfer the payment? He asked. No, I said gently. I've got it. He nodded. Not offended. Just aware. There's a difference now between helping and taking over. Melissa has stopped rearranging cabinets. The blue-handled mug stays where it belongs. The garage keypad still uses the same code. No one changes it without telling me. We don't speak about the trust anymore. We don't need to. Structure does its work quietly. Yesterday marked exactly 3 months since the night Wade told me to pack my things. We didn't commemorate it, but I remembered. I was sitting at the dining table in the late afternoon sunlight, the same place where it happened, the same chair, the same view of the front yard, and I realized something quietly powerful. If I had cried that night, if I had begged, if I had reacted with anger, this story would have ended differently. Not because I am stronger than my son, but because I chose steadiness over shock. Power doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it sits down, folds its napkin, and waits. That evening, Wade came home carrying a small wooden frame. I found this in the garage, he said. It was an old photo of my husband and me the day we signed the final mortgage payment check. We were standing on the front porch, holding a piece of paper that read paid in full. I remember that day. We ordered pizza to celebrate. Cheap paper plates. Folding chairs on the porch. We felt rich, even though our bank account didn't show it. Wade handed me the frame. I didn't know this picture existed, he said. You were in college, I replied. You were busy. He nodded slowly. You built this, he said quietly. Yes, I answered. Not defensively, not triumphantly, just fact. Melissa stood beside him. And we want to add to it, she said. Add. Not claim. Not inherit. Add. I looked at both of them for a long moment. Then we build carefully, I said. Brick by brick. Respect by respect. Wade smiled faintly. I can do that. I believe him. Later that night, I walked through the house one last time before bed. Front door. Secure. Dining table. Cleared. Living room. Lamp glowing softly. Upstairs hallway. Quiet. I paused outside the bedroom and looked down the staircase where everything had shifted weeks ago. Pack your things. Those words don't echo anymore. They've been replaced. Not by apology. By understanding. Grief took my husband. It did not take my position. It did not take my dignity. And it did not take this house. This house is not a prize passed down the moment someone passes away. It is memory. It is labor. It is partnership. It is responsibility. And while I am alive, it remains under my care. Not because I fought loudly, but because I stood firmly. Wade and Melissa live here with me now, not as owners waiting their turn, but as adults who understand boundaries. The trust remains intact. The clause remains in place. Not as a threat, as a reminder that love and structure can exist in the same home. As I turned off the hallway light, I felt something settle fully for the first time since the funeral. Not relief. Not victory. Peace. The kind that comes when you don't have to prove your place